Excited to introduce our guest speaker for this final session, Ethics and Values in Decision Making, Professor Geshi Karuri Sebina. You can all see her profile in front of you. I've known Geshi for about 20 years. When we were both youngsters, we used to, we met socially and we had several friends in common. And shortly after I met Geshi, I went through a period in my life where I realized I needed to change my village because they were not adding value and I was just in the wrong space. And as I intentionally created a new village, Geshi was someone that I had seen and admired. I enjoyed her company. And I intentionally decided to make her part of my village. And I went out, I made an effort to try and engage with her more, to meet with her for lunches and other social functions. And she has become a very dear friend to me over the years. Geshi hosted my bridal shower. She organized a little pre-wedding party for my husband and I, for all those people who couldn't travel to Kenya for our wedding. When I was pregnant with my twins, Geshi gave me a list of all the baby things that I needed. And she actually went with me to Baby City and all these other shops and said, this is what this is what a nose feeder is, and introduced me slowly and gently to motherhood. And she has been a good friend many, many times over and over and over. She's a great person. She's got a brilliant mind professionally. And she's a great mother to her teenage girls, Haki and BK. And Geshi, I'm so excited that other people get to hear from you today and learn from your lessons. Karibu sana.
Shame. Thank you so much, Sheila. That was a beautiful trip down memory lane. And yeah, sisterhood is amazing. And I've been very proud and blessed to have you as a sister. So thank you. And thank you, Rita and the team, for having me here with all of you today. I really feel honored. And young sisters, that's something I'll always make time for. And as soon as Sheila asked me, I didn't even think twice. It was an automatic yes. Not just because she's Sheila, but because what you're doing here with Girls for Girls, I think is so special and amazing. And I hope you all appreciate it. So thank you for having me. So I'm going to share screen here. Should I go ahead and start, Sheila? Should I jump into it?
Yes,
okay, cool. I had actually thought I was going to do a thing where I was going to ask all of you to anonymize yourselves, but I was pleased with the exercise Google just did, where it looks like you're all comfortable enough with each other that you're not going to judge how people vote on things. And so we won't waste time doing that. If you had a chance to read my CV, one of the things you wouldn't have seen on there was ethics and values. And so initially when I had the subject, I thought for a minute, and then I thought, actually, this applies, it definitely applies almost in every field. I've worked for more than 20 years in the public sector mainly, but also with the NGO sector and sometimes with corporate. And these issues, I think, starting in school where you are all the way through the rest of your lives and into any work environment always come up. So I think anybody can speak to it, and I hope I'll do it justice. So thank you for the challenge. And I'm going to definitely want to share some of my personal stories in interacting with these issues of ethics and values while trying to keep to time. But I also had added in, I think, just some conceptual pieces that I think might be useful for you, and I hope they are. I can't see the chat while I'm sharing screen. So maybe, Sheila, if anybody says anything or asks me to stop or slow down, just audio in, because I can't actually see the chat.
Okay, no problem.
Cool. So let me start with the end. I've learned to do this in case people fall asleep, and I hope you won't be falling asleep. So next time when you're asked, what did you learn last time? Here's the punchline. The punchline is, you've got to live and learn. I'm so glad you're already talking about values. You've been talking about values, and I would echo that values matter. Consequences also matter. So whether you flipped that switch and killed 5 or killed the 1, any of those has consequences, and those consequences matter. But you have to trust you. And you have to respect you. And you have to own that you choose, or you chose, as the case may be. And in the last bit I want to conclude with is also, you can always talk to someone. Now, be careful, obviously, when I say someone, don't choose the someone who gives you the answer you want to hear. It's got to be the someone, when Sheila talks about, you've got to know your circles and know who you're dealing with and whether these are the kinds of people who are useful as a compass those are the someones you can talk to. You're not alone. So these are my punchlines, and we'll come back to this at the end. So I'm talking a little bit about ethics and morals, and I thought it's useful to start by saying what's a moral dilemma and what's an ethical dilemma. And I don't want us to waste too much time with the definitions. Even I was a bit confounded by whether they are really distinct as I was looking around. But essentially what we're told, the moral dilemma is a situation where you're torn between right and wrong. So a situation where you are torn between what's right and what's wrong. Now, obviously, you've just talked about the trolley car riddle, about would you flip the switch. There are many other classic moral dilemmas. The other one is a lifeboat dilemma. So if you're on a lifeboat and there are only 10 spaces and there are 11 on the ship that is sinking, how do you decide who will stay behind? And obviously they complicate the story as you did with a trolley, and whether it's your mother or Nelson Mandela or whomever, you know, those things always make it even more complicated. There's also the surgeon's dilemma. If you could take 5 organs from one innocent man to save 5 patients, would you do it? And then again, you can complicate it with who are the 5 patients, who's the one man? If it was a prisoner, would it matter? There are all of these, and there are many, many other classic topics. Some of them are even in our society are real issues. So many of us have different views on things like the death penalty. We have different views on this idea of euthanasia, doctor-assisted suicide. You know, should you assist somebody to commit suicide if they're living in pain or very old or dying anyway? The military draft, you know, that's about, do you agree that young people, 18-year-old Black men, should be sent off to war somewhere? Abortion, we talked earlier about religion possibly being a value, and sometimes it's very divisive in how we think about issues like abortion. Government spying, prison reform, there are many of these social topics that almost become like these hypothetical moral dilemmas. And of course, the challenge is, as much as I gave you that definition that said it's about right and wrong, the issue is that the right and wrong is not always very clear. So it's not really useful to say what's right or what's wrong. And I also like that many of you began to ask other questions, because also this idea that there are only 2 choices sometimes is what clouds the issue, because obviously you should be able to ask questions. You know, why must you only do A or B? Aren't there other options? So those are the moral dilemmas. Now, ethical dilemmas are similar, but a little bit different. Often the distinction made is that often there's a conflict between 2 courses of action that morally both appear to be correct, and the values and principles may not be matching up. It means that the dilemma is that you would be doing something right and wrong at the same time, and that any course negates another possible course that would be good. I'll come back to what this looks like. In fact, I'll show you a small video and we can think about what this looks like. But so the slight difference often is that ethical dilemmas also often have a code that guides them. And that might be a code about rules that are explicit or laws that suggest what's right, but that there are other considerations, there are other principles at play that make this complicated. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this figure here, but just to say that these issues are studied in philosophy. In any business school, there'll be courses on business ethics and thinking about these things. Some people take very firm positions where you think that something is always true, where others are a little bit more, I must confess, like me, a little bit more relativist, where you think it depends. And then also this issue between whether you think what matters is your own personal values that you hold, or whether you think there are some universal values that are more important. And so this is a grid, a matrix, as we call it, that sort of gives you what are typical postures around. So there are people who think that everything is situational. So the rules are flexible and you can kind of decide from situation to situation, and they think that your personal values can be used for those decisions. There are people who think that actually there must always be some bigger rule. So it's not about what you think. Therefore, you may not like something, but you're willing to see it if, you know, you're willing to concede to it if it's for other people's benefit. But there are other people who are a lot firmer about what they think. Either they think it's always my way, or they think the rules are always right. And so those would be subjectivists or absolutists. And those are orientations. Again, like I said, not everything is black and white. Not all of us on all issues sit in one or the other of these boxes. But it's just to say that there are these general outlooks, and people, also people in different cultures, sometimes, you know, are in these positions without always being conscious of it. But these are issues that it's good to be aware of. I want to show this little video. And again, Sheila, I'll ask you to be my ears just to say whether you can hear it and see it, or rather let me know if you can't. So I'm gonna just push play here. And it's a YouTube video, I apologize for that. I hope the quality is okay. Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. Just 2 minutes to enjoy the peacefulness as well. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the beautiful guitar music, and that's a little video. Some of you might have seen it before. Sorry if you had to sit through it again. But I love that little video, and we won't have time to, just within this talk to analyze it all. But there are many question marks throughout that you might have caught in terms of whether many things were right or wrong. And obviously, it shows a positive outcome, and that's exciting. But what would you do if all sorts of things happened? If you saw one of your mates cheating off of your test, if somebody was making fun of somebody else, if your best friend, your girlfriend there is busy wearing something horrible and she asks you, how do I look? If someone puts on a movie that you know you're probably not allowed or shouldn't be watching. If you saw somebody picking something in a store. If your friend was being abused and asks you not to tell. If someone offers to give you the answer to something that you have to take so it would help you. If you found money on the floor at school. If somebody says they're thinking of killing themselves. If you're asked to lie about something so that you wouldn't get caught, or your friend rather. If you could get accepted to a very good university just by telling a small lie on your application. Now, these aren't issues at the same order, and I'm sure you feel you could answer, and if you had time maybe, and I guess as you go into your groups, you might have some of these conversations. Some of these you may feel are clearer what the right thing to do is than others. But it's not always that clear, right? Some of these are really challenging different norms, like, should you be loyal or should you be truthful? Friendship matters, and I think in every society and in every moral code, friendship matters, but others will say rules also matter. So you begin to pitch these things, and so if you remember what we framed earlier, that the moral dilemma sometimes is that right or wrong is not clear. The ethical dilemma sometimes is you have to take positions on what you do when perhaps neither thing is absolutely wrong. And so these are issues. And I wanted to tell you some stories. And here, actually, I do want to maybe hear from you. So if anybody's brave enough, I want you to speak up. I'll tell you what happened in the story briefly, and then I'll ask you what you think I did, because these are my own stories. And some of them I'm really exposing myself. So please don't tell. So in 1996, here's story 2. Story 2 is, I have a job. I decide to resign. This is now 2006, so like 10 years later. I resign my job and I accept a new job. And just in the 6 weeks window between when I'm going from one job to the next, so these margins appear to be an issue for me, right? I find out I'm pregnant. Now, you may not know because many of you are young, but this is kind of a big deal because not many employers want to hire somebody knowing that they're already coming in, and in the public sector, it's automatic according to the Labor Act. You're going to have 4 months paid maternity leave. It's always an issue with women of a certain age. So no boss really would hire somebody who's coming in already saying I'm pregnant. So now I've already resigned, remember? And I'm risking the new, I hadn't signed, they hadn't signed yet. So that was the issue. The new job hadn't signed the contract yet, but I had signed and it was there. And the issue was now disclosure. So what do you think? Should I disclose to them that I'm pregnant, or should I leave it? After all, when I signed, I didn't know. So, in a way, I don't really have to tell them, but I knew it would be an issue. So do I disclose or not? Let's hear your responses.
They say most women I know don't feel they are obligated to tell. So I think you did not. Don't disclose. I wouldn't. It's an unfair rule to women. Don't tell. Disclose now, sue later. You sign so they can't retract the contract. I would disclose.
Okay. So I like the point. I like all of the points made. And I like the point about you may not actually agree that the law or the rule is fair, because that's another thing. In many cases, I mean, okay, so maybe with health insurance, it's a bit more black and white because you either have the health insurance or you don't. Of course, you may have issues with the idea of insurance itself, that people can pay insurance for 4 years and your money is just gone, even though you never used it. And then when you need it, you can't use it, right? Because I can't call the insurance company and say, guys, to be fair, I paid you guys for 4 years. Could you just cover me now, even though I'm uncovered? In this case, again, yes, you're right. It may be a law that's unfair to women. So why should I, why should I disclose? Well, what I actually did in 2006 is I did declare. I did declare that I was pregnant. The boss was not happy, but the boss probably, well, maybe because he was afraid that I might sue, but maybe also because he thought I was good. And if I think about, again, why I made that decision very differently from my 1996 decision, one, I had confidence in my abilities and that I was a good employee. So I knew that, and I knew that I hadn't acted shadily. It's not like I always knew I was pregnant and now I was trying to be shiesty. But I also had confidence in my ability. If I didn't get this job, yes, I was a bit worried that, there'll be a child and there are costs, but I don't think I actually thought I couldn't get another job. So I had the confidence of that. I like to think I also had the memory of 1996, because that stuff stays with you. When you make a decision that's morally suspect, it stays with you. And so my elbow might have been fixed, but what stayed in my head about what I had done stayed with me as well. So that was 1996. Now, let's go back in time a little bit to 1995, and I'm not sure whether my screen is covering, so you'll tell me. So this was an interesting one. So I had a job where I worked in a writing organization while I was in school. And I was very lucky one summer that I had a lot of time to work on a paper through the center, and it became an award-winning paper. So it was a fantastic paper. It got published. I was invited to conferences to present. I was only, like 18, 19 years old at the time. No, actually, I was almost 20. I was 19 at the time. And so this was really exciting. So at that stage, a friend, in fact, actually a relative of mine, contacts me and tells me they're struggling with a paper that they're writing. So I say to them that, oh, I've just written this amazing paper. Why don't I forward it to you and you can get a sense of, of what it's really, I was trying to say that it's not that difficult to write. So I sent her the paper, emailed her the paper. A few months later, and I didn't think anything more of it. A few months later, my boss at the center comes to me and says there's a case of plagiarism that's been raised by the Writers Association in the US. And it's because it so happens that at a university across the country, somebody has written a paper that clearly plagiarized my paper. And he shows me the information, and lo and behold, it's my cousin who has plagiarized my paper. So he asks me, did I know about this? So what do you answer? So the question is, do you know about this? So this is your cousin. You sent the paper. She then copied the paper. In that moment, you're not sure whether your intention was for her to copy the paper. You think it wasn't the intention because you didn't tell her to copy the paper, but you did send the paper. So what do? This is your cousin, and this plagiarism, as many of you may know, is a very big offense. Somebody can get kicked out of the university for it. So what did we do in this case, guys? What do you think I did?
Tell the truth. I would speak the truth that I know and I sent the paper. I would tell the truth, which is that your intention wasn't for her to copy. Yes, 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 plagiarism rules are clear. Be honest. My cousin would understand if I told the boss the truth. Tell the truth, come clean, be honest. Tell the truth. You didn't know what they were going to do.
Okay, so in this case, you're pretty right, but you know, the situation, the truth was what now I wasn't sure was so clear, because what was the truth? Yeah, you're right. I didn't tell her to copy. I didn't say that, but I kind of also didn't say don't copy, and I didn't suggest why I was sending the paper exactly. And you know, in that moment, you really begin to question your own motives, right? Because I mean, maybe the conversation we had, maybe it sounded like I was suggesting she should copy my paper, and now by telling the truth, which would be to say that yes, I sent the paper and I had no idea she would copy, isn't that what we call throwing somebody under the bus as well? So like, now what's that about? Anyway, I did tell the truth. It's something I've always felt, and you know, actually I think it's probably the first time I'm ever really talking about it. It's something I always felt very terrible about. So although it might have been the right thing to do, and many of you seem to agree, I can tell you it's not something I've ever been very proud of, because I did feel like I threw her under the bus. And I feel that what guided that decision was maybe a time factor. I feel like if I'd had time to think about it, I might have come up with a way to respond to the question I was being asked in a way that didn't sound like I was the good person who had written a good paper and my cousin was a cheater. Because I think it came out like that. I think I came out seeming like I'd been somehow victimized and she came out looking like a demon. Now, very fortunately, she wasn't expelled. I never actually asked her what happened. I suspect they failed her course. But like I said, it's not something, whether I was right or wrong, it's not something that felt good. And I really felt in hindsight that I had answered too quickly. I feel like I should have taken time to think about how to respond. Here's my last one, my last little story. I don't know what you guys think about this dress. Do you like it? Can you see the dress? Okay, so I like this dress. I don't have a problem with this dress. I mean, I don't know if I have the figure to carry it, but I think this is a good dress. But in the year 2011, sorry, in 2011, my boss and I, where I was working at the time, had done a project that was quite important, and we were going to be pitching to quite a senior member of, well, whoever, it doesn't matter, some senior person. And this was a big sort of decision point. So this really mattered. And my boss, who was a woman, says to me that I should dress sexy for the pitch because she thinks it'll make all the difference. So number one, I don't know if she's joking or if she's serious, but she has asked me to dress in a particular way so that we can be successful with what we know is a good piece of work. What do you guys think I should do? Dress sexy or not?
Nothing wrong with the dress. Don't dress sexy. Dress as yourself. Whatever you feel comfortable with depends on your conscience. Dress like yourself. Be you. Be yourself. Dress in what makes you comfortable. Dress as you would do for the pitch. Your work will speak for itself. Dress professionally.
So thanks for that. I chose to dress as I wish, which is really not often in a dress like this. I did dress myself. She interestingly did show up dressed in a skirt that was much shorter than usual. We were successful. I don't know whether it was because of her skirt or because of the excellence of my work, but it became a thing between me and her, by the way. At least I felt it was inappropriate for her to have said it. But I also see that I guess it worked, to the extent that she dressed that. And I see this all the time. Many of us have seen this in many work environments. And there are many women who've come to believe that part of who you are is the ability to sell your look, to get something. But I think for me, maybe it's a code. It's a code that maybe is less about morals and more for me to do with maybe my politics about these kinds of issues when it comes to gender that didn't allow me to do it. And like I said, I don't have a problem with the idea of dressing sexy. I'm not very prudish about it. But I had a problem with being asked to use that to represent my work. Where my work, if I was a model, the request would make sense, but I'm not a model and the work had nothing to do with that. So anyway, my point with all of these small personal examples, other than giving you some embarrassing insight into my own life and choices, is that it's not easy. It's not easy, guys. And many of these things, many of you face many common dilemmas in your own lives. I think as students, you probably face all the time issues of whether people are cheating or whether you need to lie to fit in with people. And lying, there's a lot of gray space in the idea of what's a lie. This idea of snitching, I think, is often a very big thing. I hear my kids also talking about it quite a lot. The pressure to experiment, and sometimes it can be morally questionable. All of that happens, but it's really mirrored very much in the work environment. Very similar issues come up even when you're adulting, and you're going to be faced with these issues. You're going to be faced with issues in your career about how you get ahead. You're going to be faced, particularly as a woman, with many issues that range from harassment to opportunities that are sexual, and you'll have to decide what you think about those things. Whistleblowing is an issue. So there are lots of things that will happen as an adult, and one has to have some way to make these decisions. And I think here I'll just say you've got to be able to focus on your values. So where I started at the beginning, you've got to be able to believe that you are good and that you can trust yourself. You've got to believe that respecting yourself matters. You're here for a reason and you have a contribution to make to this world, and therefore you've got to respect yourself. You've got to realize that you have the power of choice and you are in fact making decisions. So choice is a uniquely human thing that you have, and that's power that you wield. But you've also got to know it's bigger than you. Your choices have consequences, and those consequences sometimes are bigger than just who you are and what you think, and that's somehow got to factor in. But you've also always got to remember that you're never alone. You can talk to somebody. So when you're not sure, when in doubt, and many times I wish I had done this, you can talk to somebody, and that's important. I'm just going to flip through the next few slides quite quickly. Sheila, I know that we might be a little bit slow. And how much time do we have left? Do we have any time left?
We don't have any time left, but I'm going to give you 3 minutes.
Okay, so 3 minutes is good. Thank you for that. That's kind. So, I think like I've been saying, many of these things, and many of you have heard of yin and yang as though everything is black and white. Often it's not that clear cut. And so I want to give you some tips. And so probably this is the most important slide. I'm glad we have the 3 minutes. Name the dilemma for yourself. So you decide what is this issue about, so that when you're deciding what to do about it, at least it's clear. And a lot of the resources actually say that sounds silly, but it's very important. Take your time to think. I've indicated to you that some of my decisions that I think I'm not sure about, I think might have been because I didn't take the time to think. And that links to this next one. Don't take decisions that you don't have to make in that moment. And many of us do that. Many of us feel as though because somebody's asking you now, you have to answer now. You don't always have to. So to suspend the thing until you're prepared to make that decision if you can. Accept that you might be wrong. So don't always think that there is a perfect right decision here, but you might have to do something. So commit to learning if you are wrong, but also understand that you may have to be wrong in a particular instance, and that might be okay. Don't be cruel. It's not just a Bobby Brown song. Well, most of you young ones don't get that, but, but I know Sheila does. Don't be cruel, because for me, that's one of my moral flaws, that if you're doing something that's deliberately hurtful to somebody and you had a choice to do otherwise, I think if you can avoid being cruel, avoid that. But also identify what the different interests and assumptions are, because again, I'm saying don't be cruel, but I think you've seen in some of those classic dilemmas that what is cruel is not always clear, and to whom. Try and identify, who has interests here and what assumptions are in this dilemma. Describe it to others. Sometimes in you telling the story to somebody else, either in their response or even in just your articulation of it, you might become clearer about what the issue is. Then own your decisions. Don't say or do things that you'd be ashamed of if you were asked. You should, own your stuff, own your ish. If you've said it or you've done it, then be okay with that. Commit and follow through, take responsibility from what you've done, but always review and learn. Always believe that you can do better, be better next time, which is why I'm okay to tell you these stories, even the ones I'm ashamed of, because I know I've learned from them. And then apologize if you have to. So if you do something and now you've learned and you are wrong and you hurt Sheila or you hurt Gugu or you hurt Rita, nothing wrong with coming back and saying, sister, in that moment, I thought it was the best decision. So maybe that's something I should learn from myself in terms of my cousin. There are tools and you can find them out there. We won't have time to talk about that, but there are decision-making tools you can use that sometimes can be simple and instructive, just giving you some steps when something is particularly difficult. So I think definitely try that. We won't talk about this, but it's in the slide deck that I've shared with Sheila. If you want to have a look at it, it's just basically telling you that there are different decision bases that you can use. And I think they can all be useful at different points in time. I think care is always good, but you can also think about how you use rules and how you think about outcomes as part of how you make decisions. So that's just maybe an image or a figure that you might be able to use. And basically, yeah, I think that's what I had for you today. Be careful about fear of judgment. Often we make decisions because of how other people will judge us, and we know we judge each other quite a lot. But just like I said, you've got to own the decisions you make and you've got to know where they're coming from. So take the time to figure out why you are doing something, and maybe let judgment come later. I think that there is a level at which people have to deal with themselves and the decisions they make, and you have to deal with yours. So that's also important. So I'm going to stop there. I already gave you the end, which is live and let live. Life is complicated. What's good and what's not good, sometimes they're mixed up. And that's life. You saw the little puppy dog, you can get beaten when you think you're doing the right thing. But I also like to believe, and maybe this is also an orientation, I also like to believe that what goes around comes around and eventually things somehow work out. You've got to be the best that you can be, and that's all you can do. That's all we can all do. So thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to stop there, Sheila, and just if there are any questions, I don't know if there's time for that.